Andrew McCart, IFLTV. It's been a while, Mr. Dan Rafael, but you know me, I'm always excited when I get to talk boxing with yourself. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with you, Andrew, as always.
Definitely. Listen, I'm just going to jump straight into the deep end. I'm not going to do any pleasantries. I want to get the full cock ready to rumble. Dan Rafael, talk to me about Jake Paul against Gervonta Davis. I mean, there's a 60 plus pound weight disparity on that one. Speak to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they can't have it as an authentic official boxing match because no commission in the world would sanction a boxing match between two fighters that the weight disparity was that great. I mean, years ago when UFC was still like a fringe sport and it wasn't regulated or allowed in most states in this country, they had to come up with a reason to make the commissions sanction it because back then it was like the Wild West. You just had, everybody. I mean, they were obviously the part of the attraction was they were performing in different kinds of combat, whether it was a boxer, a wrestler, jujitsu, karate, whatever it was. But the big thing is they had no weight classes. So you'd have like some sumo wrestler, fighting like a little guy. And that was one of the reasons why commissions would not agree to sanction that sport. And it was only after they established their weight classes, which was significant, that they got some traction and were then, it took a while, but slowly but surely it was sanctioned in various states and it's become the behemoth that it's become. Well, boxing has for the entirety of its existence, relied upon weight classes. You can't now all of a sudden here in 2025 have, as you said, a heavyweight slash cruiserweight, a Jake Paul that's 200 pounds, fought Mike Tyson close to 227 pounds, taken on in an official fight Tank Davis, who is a tremendously skilled boxer and a lot more experience as a professional than Jake Paul is, and was a multi-division world champion and one of the better fighters in the entire sport. But he's also a 135 pounder who fought one time at 140 back, 4 years ago or something like that. So, like you said, 65-pound weight disparity. It's a lot. Now, there's been people who are making the case to me, well, what's the big deal? We've seen massive weight disparities among boxers in the heavyweight division, but ahead of time it's an unlimited division. There is the minimum, or rather, there's no maximum, but it's rare. But those fights happen occasionally. But that doesn't mean that you should be having a lightweight fighting a cruiserweight slash heavyweight. So it'll be an exhibition fight. Now, whether they go all out and try to win, I guess we'll have to see. Some people would think maybe it turns out like other exhibitions we've seen where it doesn't have the excitement because they're not truly going for it. Like Jake Paul and Tyson. Now it was an official fight, not an exhibition, because they were on similar terms in terms of the weight. But Jake even made a point at the end of that fight, like he didn't want to knock Tyson out because he kind of felt bad for him. But then you go back and look a couple years earlier, if you remember during the throes of the pandemic, and they had the exhibition match between Roy Jones and Tyson. It was stipulated ahead of time. It wasn't like they were trying to defraud anybody, but they told the public, look, they're not supposed to go all out. It's, they're going to get in there, show their skills or what they have left of their skills, move around, give the crowd a good show, but, don't be trying to get the knockout. Obviously a knockout could happen. You can't control that. If it happens, it happens. But so I'm interested to see what sort of tack that these two guys will take. But at the end of the day, this is not a true boxing match. It's entertainment, supposedly entertainment, with two of the bigger names in the sport. Jake Paul and Tank Davis, in terms of this country anyway, are two of the biggest stars in the entire game. And they bring attention, eyeballs, ticket buyers, pay-per-view buyers, what have you, whoever they're fighting. Now, the good thing is, if you don't like this matchup, and there's a lot of people that pissed all over it, and I totally get it, at least if you're just a regular person like hundreds of millions of people around the world that subscribe to Netflix, at the very least, you don't walk away from your screen pissed off because you spent $80 or $100 on a pay-per-view because it's part of your regular subscription. So that is a silver lining, similar to the same way they're handling the Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford fight. So from the point of view as a boxing fan, you got these two events that are just part of a normal subscription. And I'll say this also, MVP is going to be handling this promotion. They're obviously, that's Jake Paul's company. One thing, even when Jake fights these sort of, let's call them non-traditional kinds of matches, one thing I will give MVP a lot of credit for is they typically put on pretty good undercards. So at the very least, whatever your thoughts are about Tank and Jake Paul, you got to figure there'll be something worthwhile on the undercard. They've got a pretty good stable that's developing, both of men and obviously top level women. So that can make things interesting too. So I'm kind of ambivalent about the event, though, Andrew, to tell you the truth. I mean, I don't hate it. I'm not in love with it. I've never been a Jake Paul hater. I've always been interested in his events. The one thing that did irritate me, though, about this was that Tank had that mess that he had against Lamont Roach earlier in the year.
I was going to come to that, yeah.
Yeah. He got the draw, which was like, in my mind, a gift from God, because either he should have lost the decision or been disqualified for all the nonsense that went down in the round where the referee messed up and did not call the knockdown, which was blatantly a knockdown. And he invoked his right to the rematch. Nobody was forcing him to do the rematch. He's the one that said, I'll do the rematch, and he picked up that option. And now he's let Lamont twist in the wind for the last, few months. And now instead of doing the rematch like he promised he would do, he's going to do this Jake Paul fight. And he's left Roach sort of sitting there just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. And people just sort of want to, brush it under the rug when that to me, that's still kind of a mess. And I get there's a lot of money at stake in the fight, but either you're going to be a real fighter and fight the top guys or you're not. And it's one thing people have been bringing up, okay, Muhammad Ali fought exhibition matches and this guy fought exhibition matches and all that. And that's absolutely correct. However, when Muhammad Ali did his, exhibition bouts, he was heavyweight champion, but he was fighting 4 and 5 and 6 times a year. Tank is going to be lucky if he fights twice a year. So if that's all you're fighting, and one of those is going to be, a non-traditional, exhibition match against a big name, but not an elite fighter who's 60 pounds heavier than you, how could you want to see that more than against a real contender in a fight where there's a reason to have the match because of what happened in the first fight? So, I'm kind of torn about it. It is what it is.
You sent a tweet out saying there are ducks and then there are really, really big ducks.
Oh, yeah.
Are you alluding to Gervonta Davis ducking Lamont Roach? Is
100%.
He ducking Lamont?
Absolutely. He picked up look, he knows he got away with something that night. It's not his fault. That was the referee's decision. And then ultimately on the review of the New York State Athletic Commission on technicalities. But everybody knows that was a real knockdown. Everybody knows that he broke the rules by taking the knee and then running to the corner and having the corner swab him off. And I'm not saying he should have been disqualified. My only contention at the very least is it should have been ruled a knockdown. Had it been ruled a knockdown, Lamont Roach wins the fight. So he was embarrassed by that situation. He knows he did not perform at his best. And to his credit, he exercised the right to the rematch right away. I mean, he was the A side, obviously. So in that contract, whether it was a loss or a draw, he had the right to seek a second fight. And he picked it up. They were supposed to have the fight in June. Then it was supposed to have the fight in August. He didn't do the fight. He was never in training camp. The fight was never announced. And then part of the reason it kind of got a little bit sidetracked also was because he got arrested on a domestic violence charge. Now, ultimately, that was dropped about a week or so ago. But nonetheless, the Roach fight didn't happen. And then here we go. He's taking the Jake Paul fight. So, yeah, I think he's avoiding Lamont Roach. Now, I get it. It's about the money. That's fine. But then he just shouldn't have picked up the rematch in the first place.
I want to get your thoughts on, you've been in the game a long time. You've been writing about the sport for a very, very long time. You've covered some of the biggest names in the sport. When you've got fighters like Gervonta Davis taking on the Jake Paul, like as an exhibition fight, we've seen it before in the past, as you've just said. But where does the integrity of the sport come in? Like it seems like it's more so the money than the belts and legacy and becoming a champion. It feels like more and more fighters are just chasing the dollar bill or the pound note, as we say over here. When are we going to get back to the point where it is about the best fighting the best?
Well, I don't go for that fantasy. That's a fantasy. Mm-hmm. That is a fantasy. That is absolutely, completely nonsense. Boxing has always, from day one, been about money. Now, what I would say is, if you fight the best and you put on the best fights, the money is going to be there. So they go hand in hand. Now, there are times where you don't have to fight the best and you can still make a boatload of money because you have, a certain level of popularity and the ability to sell tickets. Jake Paul, and again, I'm not knocking Jake. I've been a big supporter of Jake's career. I'm just using him as the example because that's what's happening right now. He's never faced a top guy. He's always made a lot of money. So I have no problem with that. I wish all fighters, when they get in the ring and risk their lives, make a lot of money. But if you fight the best, you're still going to be able to make money and you're still going to do right by the sport. So, Tank Davis is going to make millions of dollars no matter who he fights. It's only a matter of how many millions of dollars he's going to make. So he's made the decision that he wants to make one level of millions of dollars for a sort of circus type fight. Fine. As opposed to making still millions of dollars, but maybe less millions of dollars to clean up the mess from the first fight in an authentic world championship fight. That's the choice he has to make.
I'll come on to another point then. When you said on a tweet, again, I'm keep picking up your tweets, Dan, I do apologize.
That's fine.
But you
No,
said
you don't have to apologize. They're public. I know what I'm writing. I know what I'm putting out there. It's not like I got nothing to hide.
I want you to clarify or go in a little bit more depth when you said American boxing RIP. What did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is that these are two of the biggest American stars in the sport who fight 60 some pounds separate from each other, and they could have legitimately significant fights against better grade of opponents. Now, in terms of Jake, maybe not at the championship level, but he could certainly step up the level of opposition to fight an actual contender or something like that, not just a faded name from the past, like a once great Tyson or a never great but has a big name Julio Cesar Chavez, or a developmental kind of fight. Fine, I'm not. This is not even really based on Jake because he's following the same thing he's always done. He's been doing it from day one, and I understand when he talks about, he can do his career on two tracks. On the one hand, I want to develop my boxing skills and I want to become a world champion in the cruiserweight division. I can respect that. But on the other hand, if a big event comes along, I'm not going to turn down the opportunity to make a mega event and make, crazy amounts of money. So he's kind of trying to, do both at the same time. You know what I mean? Kind of thread that needle, if you will. On the Tank Davis side of things, though, he is that world championship level fighter who has a lot of skills and can make a lot of money no matter who he fights. And he's elected to take a different route because he's not fighting the best guys. Even when he was making title defenses, he's been criticized very heavily by a lot of people because he hasn't fought the elites. He's never had a unification fight, for example. It's not like he fought bad fighters or anything like that. I mean, Frank Martin was like a good contender, but wasn't like a Shakur Stevenson, as an example. I'm just saying that there has been people critical of his opponent selection. And the one time where there was a fight on a tee that had a lot of public interest against a legitimate world championship level opponent in Lamont Roach, who a lot of people thought beat him, he picked up the rematch and then he walked away from it. So there's a level of disappointment from some. So when I talk about RIP American boxing, the American boxing scene is in disarray, let's say, at the moment, because there are a lot of good American fighters. But if you take a look at what's happening, like take David Benavidez or take Devin Haney and Brian Norman and Shakur, they're fighting their fights on the Riyadh season cards. Now, Shakur has, fought the one fight in Saudi Arabia. Benavidez and Haney and Norman, their next fights are taking place overseas. So they're leaving America. And let me tell you, if you took a Shakur against, a top guy, a Davis, for example, you took Shakur, if Davis would be willing to fight Shakur Stevenson, that fight could fill up any kind of stadium or arena in this country and do a good amount of viewers and sell a lot of tickets and generate a tremendous amount of revenue. But they've opted to do something different. And you take a Benavidez and you send them over to Saudi Arabia. He's just was becoming a pretty big draw in the United States. And now he's leaving our ecosystem, if that makes sense. Same thing with a Haney, Brian Norman. Brian Norman's starting to get a little bit of traction. And now suddenly he's going overseas. So there's such a dearth of top level fights in the United States. Now I know we have Canelo and Crawford coming up, and Crawford is obviously, the number one American boxer. And even though Canelo is Mexican, he's made his career fighting in the United States of America. So if you're a boxing fan in the States, Canelo Alvarez, and obviously he has his Mexican fans also. But that's one fight, and that's a big one, fair enough. But the lack of top-level, quality, competitive fights in the United States that involve Americans is in the toilet right now. And, when Jake Paul is fighting Tank Davis, again, it may be a big event, and there'll be a lot of people that watch it. I'm not mad at the fight. I'm just saying it's just an indictment of where the rest of the sport is in this country.
Do you need a heavyweight? Because I've seen the top 10, the Ring Magazine top 10. I don't think there's an American in it. When you think about heavyweight boxing from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there was America ruled. America ruled that whole division all the way up from Joe Louis to Muhammad Ali's, all the Mike Tysons, all the greats, George Foreman, Joe Frazier. I can name, well, you could probably name a lot more than me, Dan, but does
Are you
America
talking just
right
about
now,
heavyweights?
Heavyweights. Yeah, I'm talking about heavyweight. Does America right now, does America boxing scene right now need that heavyweight star?
We haven't had a heavyweight star in a long time. So, I mean, do we? Yeah, we've needed it for a long time. I mean, I was funny. I was thinking about this just a week or so ago. It was the anniversary, and I always post, things on my social media when it's anniversaries of fights. that I have like memorabilia from a program or a
Yeah, yeah.
credential that I covered the fight or a poster or something like that. So it was just in the last week or so was the anniversary. I forget how many years, but it's probably around 20 or so since the heavyweight championship fight between then WBC heavyweight title holder Hasim Rahman against Oleg Maskiev. They were fighting in a rematch in Las Vegas that I covered. And the big thing about that fight, it was titled America's Last Line of Defense. Why? Because Hasim Rahman, this was when, the earlier days of the recognized four belt era, Rahman was the WBC champion, but the other four belts were held by fighters from the former Soviet republics. You had Klitschko held one of the titles, you had Nikolai Valuev had one of the belts, and you had Sergei Lyakovich, I believe was the other who had one of the belts. And so the notion that if Rahman loses to Maskiev, that all four titles will now be held by non-Americans who all come from the former Soviet republics was like an alien concept. Because as you said, the heavyweight championship, whether it was one belt, two belts, three belts, four belts, whatever, was almost always the primary domain of the United States fighters. And when Rahman got knocked out that night, it became a clean sweep for the non-American, former Soviet fighters. And it's pretty much continued from there. Now, we've had a few guys that have won belts along the way, Lamont Brewster, Deontay Wilder, and others, but it's now become the domain of the Europeans and certainly the Brits have had a lot of success. And there hasn't been that big American heavyweight in a long time. I mean, okay, for like 5 minutes, we had Andy Ruiz, who had the title for a little while, a Mexican-American when he had the big upset over Joshua, but he quickly lost it in the rematch. I mean, Deontay Wilder had a good run, and obviously his career is now on the downslide, and he lost that trilogy with Fury and the title. And so when I look around, I can't see like a big name American contender right now. Who's the number one American contender? You got a couple of guys doing their thing. Ruiz is in like semi-retirement. Jared Miller has lost some fights now, and there's Michael Hunter's around, but has never done much of anything, and is now getting older. I mean, it's a pretty piss poor group of guys at the moment. You have Jared Anderson that we thought had a lot of potential. He was badly knocked out and beaten very terribly by Martin McCauley. There's some hope maybe for the Olympian Richard Torres Jr., but he's still a prospect. We'll see how far he can advance. Hopefully, for his sake, he can get to the next level. But heavyweight boxing in America stinks. Period.
Why? How can you pinpoint? Can you see why? What is? I know there's basketball. I know you're big guys. They play basketball. They play American football.
It's a
But the
good question.
UFC,
I don't really know why. I can't say that. Maybe some are going into UFC. There's always been and I believe is sort of the false narrative that our best heavyweights are they're playing football, but football's been a big thing for many years. It's not like it just suddenly happened. So there might be a couple of guys that go that direction. So I wish I could pinpoint it. I think part of it has to do with the general situation with the amateur system in the United States. It's not nearly as well funded. There doesn't get nearly as much attention. As an example, the United States was such a powerhouse in the amateurs that we didn't have to have our team go to qualifying matches. Our guys made the Olympic team. We had our United States boxing trials, and the boxer that won their weight class got to go to the Olympics. But because we have had less success over the years now, and they redid some of the ways that the qualifying works, is now the Americans have to go and do what everybody else has to do, which is qualify, because we're no longer the powerhouse that we once were. So even when we put our fighters in the Olympics, like for example, the most recent Olympics, we didn't even field a full squad. I mean, for us not to have a full squad was like unbelievably, that never happened. Now this past Olympics, I don't know, we had like what, 4 men, something like that. It was not nearly the complete squad. So, I mean, part of it starts at the grassroots. It starts in the amateur level, and then it percolates into the pros.
I think, if you remember Amir Khan, he was the only boxer we had in 2004, Athens 2004.
Mhm.
And then that sort of like Amir Khan sort of spearheaded because he was that poster boy, and then it spread and spread. And now look where we are. Do you need, well, you had a Shakur Stevenson, I suppose, but do you need a really, really standout superstar in the amateurs coming out to bring
I
that,
think
bring
that's
that
an
back?
anomaly because I don't think in America anymore you can become a superstar in the amateurs because there's nobody that's really paying attention to the amateurs. You used to see on a regular, even as late as like the early 2000s, let's say, there would still be some of the top amateur tournaments televised. You might see the Olympic trials on an ESPN or some platform. Now you don't see any of that. There's no, I mean, back again, I don't want to date myself, but back in the day, like in the heyday of like the 70s, early 80s, The top amateur competitions were regularly on Wide World of Sports on ABC terrestrial television. That doesn't exist anymore. So the notion that there could be a superstar in our amateur system is it doesn't make sense, because you can't become a superstar in the amateurs when boxing has so little coverage in the amateurs on television and so little interest, because a lot of the fights are, the tournament schedule is not known to the public. It's hard enough sometimes to even follow pro boxing for a lot of fans, that the idea that they're going to now invest time and energy into the amateurs, this doesn't make sense. It's unfortunate.
Well, again, I think it's safe to say Britain, we've dominated the heavyweight division maybe for the last, what, 6, 7, 8 years. And now,
Probably been longer than that. I mean,
maybe
with
even longer than
Joshua
that.
and Fury.
Yeah, you're right. But now we've got a young fighter in Moses Itauma, 20 years old. Now, again, people say like it's like, oh, he reminds me of Mike Tyson, young, knocking everybody out. But I don't see it stylistically like Mike Tyson. I just see a young heavyweight blitzing everybody in a similar way that Mike Tyson did it. So when you look at Moses Atama, what goes through your mind when you see this young man go?
I mean, he's super exciting. I had the opportunity to spend some time interviewing him prior to the fight with Dillian White, and he came off as a really mature, grounded young man who understands the attention he's receiving, seems to be handling it well. You hope that can continue, because the bigger the fights and the bigger the knockouts, the more attention, the more money, the more distractions are possible. So hopefully he can maintain the good level that he's on. But he's like a meteor right now. I mean, there's nothing holding him back. He's got speed. He's got some of the quickest hands you'll see on a heavyweight ever. The fact that he's a southpaw who has big power is going to give problems to opponents. He has very good technique. Defensively, he seems pretty sound. I mean, I can't really put my finger on anything that I think that he does badly. He might hang his chin a little bit high up in the air. They can work on that. That's a very correctable kind of mistake. But there's nothing not to love about the kid. And always have to remember that he's 20. So when you mentioned about a lot of folks that compare him to Tyson, when I interviewed Moses, I asked him about that, because I think it's unfair to take any young heavyweight and make that comparison to Mike Tyson.
Mm.
And his position was, look, I know, and I said what you said, you don't fight anything alike. Mike was, a shorter, squatter guy. He had great punching power, but he was not a lefty. That really the only similarity, in my opinion, was the fact that it was the matter of that you're young. And he's like, yeah, because when Mike was 20, 21, 22, he was killing it and, knocking everybody out. And I guess I'm on that same path, but we don't fight anything alike. But there are worse guys to be compared to, than a young Mike Tyson in the heavyweight division. But I think Moses took that well, with the understanding that I don't think people literally meant that, but that was a very great compliment. I think he enjoyed that, even though he probably preferred, the way he said it, not to have those comparisons. But I don't feel like he has, at least on a public level. I mean, I can't tell you what he's feeling when he closes his eyes at night, but it doesn't feel like he feels the pressure of that. But he also knows, I mean, especially in a place like the UK, where the heavyweight division has been so robust in recent years and has produced some really humongous fights and some great superstars like Joshua and Fury, that he's in that position to become that next guy. Look, Joshua and Fury are, either retired or on the way out. I mean, if you believe Fury's retirement, I guess he's back in retirement again. Who knows? AJ still plans to fight again, but we all know he's on the back nine of his career. He's a lot closer to the end. Moses Atama looks to be the future, not only of British heavyweight boxing, but of heavyweight boxing, period. Alexander Usyk's the undisputed champ. He's 38 years old, and he's been at times contemplated retirement after the first Fury fight, I think, maybe the second Fury fight. So, he may still have some great fights left in him, but it's not like it's years and years worth. So who's going to replace these guys? And Moses Itama, with the way he fights, a very appealing style, he's going to have a great fan base. That he's a guy that I believe that if he continues to develop, and he's still not a finished product. The guy's 20. He has now 26 rounds as a professional. That's not a lot, obviously, but he's a guy that down the road can be filling up places like Wembley Stadium and the big arenas.
One of his dreams, I seen in an interview, is to fight in America. Now,
Yeah,
when I look at the heavyweight scene, and I mentioned Richard Torres Jr. because of this, he's a young heavyweight, fast hands, come forward type fighter. I think stylistically that fight makes sense for me. Maybe because people are talking about what next for Moses Atama, who next for Moses Atama. They're talking about Parker, Cabayao, all these names. I like the Richard Torres Jr. fight. I like a fight for Moses in America against Richard Torres Jr. I might be way off here, but what do you think about that?
Well, as a fight fan, who wouldn't want to see that, right? You got,
Mm.
I mean, arguably two of the better younger heavyweights. I mean, Itauma clearly the top young heavyweight. I picked him at the end of 2024 as my prospect of the year. I feel good about that pick after what I've seen now in the last few fights. And while Richard Torres, I didn't rank as highly as that, but in terms of what's available in the United States, Richard is the best we have right now. And to Richard's credit, he's won me over to some degree because he's put the work in. You can tell he comes in shape. He's got quick hands also, maybe not as quick as Moses, but he's got good power. He has been slowly but steadily stepping up his level of opposition as well. I mean, if the promoters want to make the fight, I would be happy to see that. I mean, I get the fact that they're looking at Itauma, mentioning guys like Usyk for the title. I think that's maybe a little bit too soon. But if you wanted to put him in, like you said, Parker or Caballero, if they would take the fight, or a Fabio Wardley, or pick another guy that's considered a good contender in the division. But yeah, I mean, if Moses came to America to fight Richard Torres, I don't know what the economic situation would be for that fight, because it's not a big fight. Can't do that, like, at least in America anyway. It's not really like a pay-per-view or something that's going to do millions and millions in the gate. But damn, I'd watch that fight. Why not? I mean, two young heavyweights. And it's not like the guy that loses, their career is over. Guys take losses, and they can go on and do great things.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to give you a little tip talking about prospects. In Philly, on the Boots undercard, there's a young prospect coming over from the UK called Giorgio Vizioli. I don't know if you've seen him yet, have you?
The name, I know the name, and obviously I know he's on that card, but I'm trying to place if I've seen him. Is he? I don't know if I have seen him, to be honest.
He is my top prospect.
Oh,
So
okay.
when
So
you
now I
see
got to
him,
pay attention to him, right?
listen, for what my word's worth, yes. You know what I mean? What he is, I really am big on Giorgio Vizioli. So when you see him out in Philly, keep an eye on him,
So does
because
that mean you're making the trip for that fight?
I hope so. I really hope so. I really hope so. Dan, we've got 7 minutes left on this call, so I want to quickly jump into the 154-pound division. I seen
Okay.
your tweets. Vandura, Thurman, Butch is out. Virgil Ortiz is coming out. Josh Kelly's got a good fight against I forgot you can say his name better than me.
Murtazalev.
Martazalev, there you go. So it seems this 154-pound division is heating up quite nicely.
Listen, 154 pounds, in my mind, in terms of, it doesn't have like that one big superstar name, but in terms of like competition and quality guys and experienced guys and fighters that you can mix and match, not only are they competitive matches for the most part, it seems to me, that either guy could win, but they probably stylistically would be entertaining fights. So there's a lot going on there. You mentioned a couple of the fights, so it's been like a real boon time now. So they announced the Jaron Ennis fight. He's moving up from welterweight to junior middleweight. I've already had my say on that fight. Eddie Hearn disagrees with me. I think that fight stinks in terms of the public acceptance of the fight. I'm not saying it's a bad fight, but the opponent is completely unknown, even if he turns out to be a very good fighter. So I'm not talking about that fight. I'm talking about all the other matches that are being made between named guys. So Sebastian Fundora is on the verge of finalizing a deal with Keith Thurman. Yeah, Keith's a little older and hasn't really been active, but he had been injured. He came off his injury, looked good in Australia, got a knockout in his new weight class, and so he's going to have that opportunity. That's an interesting fight. Keith will talk it up. It'll be a good promotion and probably be a pretty good fight. You can say whatever you want about Keith Thurman. You don't see Keith Thurman in bad fights. Keith Thurman's got a good chin. Keith Thurman's got good power. So I'm down with that fight. The other fight that they're in the process of getting done, I know Erickson Lubin has signed for the fight, according to his team, and they notified the IBF of that. The reason why is because Lubin was the mandatory to fight Murtazalea for the IBF title, and they were in a negotiation, but he pulled out of that, not because he was scared to fight him, but he got a better offer to go fight Virgil Ortiz for the WBC's interim belt. So that fight is in the process of getting done. That is going to probably be on November 8th. That's a really good matchup. Virgil's been looking for a good name, and Lubin always comes to fight. He's got a decent resume. He's been in the ring with some good opponents through the years. That's another meaningful fight in the division. When Murtazalev didn't get the fight with Lubin, they went down the IBF rankings, and next leading available contender is the UK's Josh Kelly. So, well, again, the fight's not made, and if they can't make a deal, it'll wind up in a purse bid. But the two sides are talking about making that match. That's a big step up for Kelly. There's been so much hype about him after his Olympic, his amateur status and going to the Olympics. To me, Josh has been a little bit of a disappointment in the pros. He had the upset loss and hasn't really fought a lot of guys, but I got to believe getting a chance to fight for the title, you're going to come in really at your best, ready to fight. So that could be interesting. And then made another good fight, a rematch between Sergey Boachuk, who's the mandatory in the WBC, used to have the interim belt. He has 2 losses. One was a super close decision in a great fight against Ortiz. The other one was a few years earlier. He got stopped in a fight he was winning against Brandon Adams. And now they're doing that rematch between Boachuk. He'll get a chance to avenge that loss. That's a really good matchup. And that will be one of the preliminary fights. It's like the final prelim on the card with Canelo and Crawford before they begin the main card. So that was just announced by Dana White a few days ago. So that's a bunch of good, solid matchups that are going to reshape the top level of the 154 division. And I'm here for it.
I'm here for it as well. And hopefully, if everything goes and the stars align, we get Boots Ennis against Virgil Ortiz. I think that fight is it's just up there for me. It's a fantastic fight.
I'll just say one thing real quick about that. So despite my irritation about how they're handling the Ennis fight that's coming up, it is clearly from what Eddie has said that Boots has signed some type of agreement with him to do that fight. So their side, they know what their terms are. And if you listen to Virgil and Oscar De La Hoya on their side, they're down for that also. So if they win their upcoming fights, it's not like official yet, but if Boots takes care of his debut at 54 and Virgil defeats his fight coming, if he wins his fight coming up against Lubin, then there's a very good chance that sometime in the early part of next year, I'm thinking February, March type of time frame, that we probably would get a chance to see Virgil Ortiz, in that fight against Boots Ennis if they keep to their word, and that would obviously be another highly significant matchup in the division.
Definitely, especially for the US as well, for the US market.
Well, then my RIP will be rising from the ashes a little bit because fight, you got to hope. And I got nothing against Saudi Arabia, but that's the kind of fight you want to see here in America.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Dan, as always, I appreciate your time. It's getting dark here and I've not got a light on. I don't know if you can still see me. I don't know if my computer light's reading, yeah? Thank you so much for your time, as always, Dan. And as always, description, everything that Dan does, his Substack, his podcast, his newsletter is all in the description below this. Anything else you'd like to add, Dan?
I think we're good, man. I just hope you have a good weekend.
Thank you very much, Dan. Like I said, Crawford Canelo coming up, so no doubt I'll give you an email very, very shortly to talk about that. But as always, thank you so much, mate, and have a good day, and I'll speak to you soon.
You bet.
Thanks, Dan.